Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. I hope everyone's having a great start to the week. I'm still a little bit messed up because of daylight savings. It feels so much later than it is, and I never really like that. I always say I like gaining an hour of sleep, but then on the back end, it always kind of stinks when it feels like it's like 9 o'clock when it's really 5 p.m. So I hope everyone's adjusting to that better than me. But yeah, we're getting into the holiday season, so that's exciting. So it's a great time of year right now. Great sports time, great time to be a sports fan. So I'm really looking forward to this episode. I have a really great guest with me today. He's been a few different places, has kind of been around the Boston sports realm. Does really good Celtics content now for NBC Sports Boston. So Max, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on and joining me. Before we kind of get into it, could you just tell people a little bit about your background and how you kind of got involved in sports and ended up where you are now?
Oh, well, that's a loaded question, but just
Yes.
briefly, I worked I got an internship at a company called CN8 when I was in college at Northeastern University. I'm originally from Philadelphia. I moved up here for college, and that led to a job at Nesson. I was at Nesson for 3 years, and then I was at a different company, not in sports, and then I got hired through one of my connections at Nesson at what was then Comcast Sportsnet, but turned into NBC Sports Boston, and I've been mainly on the Celtics for the last, I believe, 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, covering basketball and covering the Celtics every day for work is probably a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great. I don't call it work, really. I mean, I have to watch. So, there's sometimes, usually not with the Celtics, they've been pretty good, but there's some seasons like last year that kind of drag on, and you're just like,
Mhm.
man, I wouldn't be watching it if I wasn't getting paid to. But you really can't complain, and it's a good. I like working in television too. I like the people I work with. It's a lot of fun, and I think the fact that I did not grow up a Celtics fan actually helps in that. I don't get too beat up over losses, and I'm excited when they win. So it really works out.
Yeah, no, that does work out. What did you grow up as a Sixers fan? Being from Philly?
Sixers fan, yeah, no
Makes
choice.
sense.
I
Yeah.
don't. You can see I have a Sixers hat and a Celtics hat there.
Oh, yep. Yeah,
Helping
that's
us out.
that's funny. Yeah, so they kind of share your space there. Well, yeah, I understand. I mean, growing up in the Philly area, there wasn't really another option.
Right, you don't choose to be a Philadelphia sports fan. You're born into it. Especially when I was, it took you know, 25 plus years before I was ever alive for a championship in
Yeah.
Philadelphia. But that, I feel like that builds character. Whereas kids these days in Boston are like, it's been a few years and they're just like, what? No championships? I thought we won every year. So, it's a little bit different. But, the older heads in Boston went through their dark days too. So,
Exactly. It's a generational thing here because some people are used to kind of the dark days and not seeing any success, but then you have younger generations that's really all they're used to is just seeing at least one championship from a Boston team for a lot of consecutive years. And so they're just not used to just going a few years without at least one of the teams winning a championship.
it's pretty crazy. It really is. I mean, it made working at a sports station great because, even though it wasn't my favorite team winning the Stanley Cup in 2011, that was a fun ride with the Bruins,
Yeah.
late nights working and just celebrating, even though, it wasn't anything that I was involved in, but like all my coworkers were fans and, we did great coverage and it was fun. So, and Super Bowl runs for the Patriots and, one for the Eagles there was great with the Patriots also involved,
I don't
but
like to talk about
right. I still don't believe it happened, but it's all right. And it's it means that the Celtics really they don't get a long leash with fans around here because they're so
that.
used to winning that if you're not like people can't understand how great of an achievement it was to go to three Eastern Conference Finals in 4 years because they're like, well, they didn't win it. And I'm, sitting here like there's teams that don't make the playoffs sometimes, like that's actually pretty regular. A large, more than half the league doesn't make the playoffs
Yeah.
or half the league doesn't make the playoffs. So, making it to the last stage of your conference is it's not something to put a banner up about, but it's, it's good, and it's good to keep it in perspective, but it's hard when, you're just surrounded by titles in all the other sports.
Yeah, because people are very, very critical of the teams here. They'll and it's either you win a championship or like you suck to half the fan base. And it's just one of those situations where if you get close but you don't win it all, some people don't really recognize that because it's like, they didn't go all the way. So they just get disappointed. So it's hard for them to really see the positive side of that.
Yeah, and I can, I get it. It's good to, shoot for the moon. But hey, if
Yeah.
you miss, you end up in the stars, right? You want high expectations. That's good for a fan base, but you know, sometimes it gets a little too crazy with the negativity, and it's good to keep it in perspective. And even if the Celtics struggle, like they have to start this season, it's like they still, have two thoroughbreds, not even in their prime yet, locked up to long-term deals, that seem like great human beings, as well as athletes that want to get better, want to win, which is the envy of most teams in the NBA.
Yeah, exactly. And we were talking off air briefly about this, about how Jason Tatum's been kind of struggling to start this season, and people have been very, very concerned. People on Twitter have been just very much expressing frustration that I've seen about him and his performance so far this season. And I think in their last game, we finally started to see him kind of, start to figure things out. And I was always from the perspective, I'm not concerned about it. He's Jason Tatum. He'll figure it out. I think it's just a beginning of the season type of scenario. But how did you kind of feel about him coming into the season? Because he definitely was underperforming based on what we would expect from him.
Yeah, I was surprised, to be honest, because I thought he was going to hit the ground running. He tends to start, not slow, but he just gets like incredibly hot around the middle to second half of the year usually, and sustains that for the rest of the season. So it's not that he starts slow; it's just that he gets really hot at the end. But he started slow this year, like really bad. He usually does not have back-to-back bad shooting games. Like he still is prone to have bad, like really gross shooting nights where he's like in the 20s and he's shooting over 20 shots, which is not great. But he's in the past is just like that's once. Occasionally it would be like a 2-game stretch. But this year it was like almost every game he was really bad.
Yeah.
And it seemed like just kind of something wasn't right with him. There are people speculating about maybe injury. Um, it looked to me like it was almost like he was just getting frustrated at the refs and just letting that affect him, and he was trying to be more of a passer. Like he would tend to pass a lot in the first half and then just say, forget it, I'm going to just shoot everything in the second half. He was just trying to find his flow. But last game he was back to being Jason Tatum. He got his groove back, and what I love to see with those little sidestep step backs at 3, he went right once, he usually goes left, and it's a beautiful shot. I love the way it looks. I never think it's going to miss. And there were games where he was like 1 for 9 from 3, so it wasn't like he wasn't shooting threes, but he wasn't shooting Jason Tatum threes where it's like he's just in his bag. He's dribbling. He could go to the basket, but he's going to pull back. I love that. I think that's what makes him special is that shot, that 3-point shot, that step back, and he was hitting those. And he just had command of the team. And even though they lost, it was a close game. They probably, well, I don't know if they would have won, but there's a couple boneheaded mistakes at the end by someone who doesn't usually make them, that kind of took it out of Tatum's hands. So, um, I think I was not worried about him. It was like I was telling you before we started recording. It was perplexing and a little vexing because it's like, why aren't you just doing what you were doing last year? Um, it's not like he wasn't shooting. It was like he just wasn't taking the right shots. So it looks like he figured it out, and hopefully he can build on it.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like something was just out of sorts with him. Like he was just off or something in his head was going on mentally where he just didn't really know what his place was or was trying to almost figure out his groove and try to find his stride again, and it seemed like he was really struggling to do that or just didn't know what he should be doing at certain points. And it was just weird because we've never really seen it like that. And like you said, he does heat up in the middle of the season typically, but he never starts off this poorly. So that's why it was definitely a little bit of a concern. Then, of course, there were the people that were, being a little overreactionary and saying we should trade him because he's not part of the future. And I'm like, yeah, here we go with that section of the fan base that have
For
seen
who?
very
Who would you
few
trade
games
Jason
so
Tatum
far.
for? Like, that's crazy to me.
I know.
I mean, you'd have to be like, oh, what? So, like, is Dallas going to trade Luka? I mean, that's the kind of like the level player that we're talking about here. He's really good. He's a special talent. He's going to have his number in the rafters. Hopefully he'll help bring a banner to Boston. So, like, he's 23. He's trying to figure it out. He's a good kid. He's last year and then this year, it's his team. It's him and Jalen's team, and they're growing into that role. There were some struggles to start this year. There's some struggles last year, but again, they're super young. They're not going to win a championship this year. They aren't supposed to. I know that we all have expectations. We want them to, and I hope. Look, maybe there's a chance they might, but if you look at it, players don't win championships that early. Like 23 or 25-year-olds are your best players. It's usually when they're like 26, 27, 28, all the greats, LeBron, Michael Jordan, all those guys. That's when it happens. And there's always years of people saying, are they going to be able to do it? And then when they become like grown adults with fully developed brains at age 26 and 27, they elevate. They take it to another level, which is crazy for someone like Jason Tatum, who's already so good. And Jaylen Brown, too. I mean, what a start to the season. It sucks that he's out, but I have no doubt that he'll come back and just pick up where he left off because, I mean, he's been really, he was up and down a little bit this year. His road home splits were weird, but for the most part, since about 3 years ago, Jaylen has just been like, yeah, he'll have a bad game, but next game he's back. He's very consistently a 20-point scorer at least. And this year he was like, well, maybe I'll score 40. So they got a good thing going.
Yeah, and I mean those two really to me are that glue. You want to build your team around them because those two I feel like are eventually going to lead you to a championship and they're still developing like you said and they're still really young. And so the fact that they're this good right now, I feel like should be having people be excited, not be like, oh, we should trade one of them because I just feel like that's going to be the duo that you're going to need down the road to really lead them to a championship because especially I know their leadership styles are very different, but that's what we need right now is those two to kind of lead the team and then everybody else can be built around them and that's what we're seeing so far. Those two really are the glue to me that's going to keep this team together and give them a real chance to win a championship.
Absolutely. And I think what Marcus Smart, when he came out in the media and criticized them, I think, one, I agreed with what Marcus said. I didn't have a problem with it. I can see how, there's differing opinions on that. And I'm completely, open to other people's opinions on it. It clearly upset the players. But I'll say this. It may have had a galvanizing effect, especially for those two, for Jaylen and Jason, because, they've been playing well since, or at least, taking turns. They won 2 out of 3 games on the road, hard games. Beating Miami was,
That was a really good win.
That was that was like the best win they've had in like 3 years. It feels like that. I think it was the second quarter of that game was like the best quarter I can remember. I can't remember a better quarter, to be honest. Like, it was so good. I got to the control room for halftime. I was like, that's the best quarter of Celtics basketball I remember. Like, it was so, like, it was convincing. And then they kind of got punched a little and punched back. And that's the one thing that they've done this year that they didn't do last year is that even though they have lost these games, they've taken punches and punched back. In Charlotte, they ended up winning the game, but, they would just fold. They would just fold if they took a hit in the fourth quarter and oh, well, we're going to lose. And they would just seem defeated. And this year, even if they don't come back and win the game, they've fought back and they've made it close. They've gone to overtime. They got buzzer beatered by Luka. It's like.
That was such a crazy shot, too.
It was. And it was, again, and the same thing happened last year. And I remember thinking, like, that's why you don't want it to be a one possession game against a team with a Luka because superstars will steal games from you. Yeah. This was a little different because the Celtics were fighting to claw back in, and look, they showed moxie. Again, it's a make miss league, it's a win loss league. Wins matter. But at the end of the day, with Tatum getting back on track and them showing that fight like they have all season, except for the Raptors game, it really
Yeah, that's
it was encouraging. It really was. Well, and also the Bulls game when they blew that lead. But
yeah, that was bad
uh,
as well.
there's been a couple blips, not been perfect. But again, I just do feel like there's a bit more of a more fight in them than there has been last year, maybe even the year before. So, um, you know, I'm a positive guy. I'm not living and dying with the losses here. So I and it's a process, and I think that they got a rookie coach who's got zero time to learn on the job. He just has to be good all of a sudden. So, there's going to be some bumps in the road. There's a new chemistry with the team. There's I think Al Horford being there is just so important. But there's dynamics with Marcus and Jalen. It feels like every year. So they'll figure it out. And I think that, seeding really, especially this early in the season, but just in general, like I don't think they're gonna be the one seed, obviously. So like I want them to be healthy and clicking in the playoffs, and then let's see what happens, and let's try to build from there. And honestly, it seems like the front office is building for next offseason anyway to make a run at a Bradley Beal type. And you know, we'll see.
Yeah, and this year was supposed to be very much, a rebuilding year as it is, an experimental year with, like you said, a new coach, some new players being brought onto the team, and just a different feel to this roster this year. And so it wasn't really supposed to be a year where they were making a run at a championship. It was supposed to be very much a year where they come in, see how it goes, and figure things out, and then really try for next year to maybe add some pieces that can really get them over that hump and really push them to a championship. So this year, I feel like this year, if they make the playoffs, they can make a even just a slight run in the playoffs. I feel like that would be an accomplishment for this year, because this isn't supposed to be a year where they go and they win a championship. And especially like you said with the coaching, I mean, Ime so far, like it's his first season as a head coach. I feel like obviously there's still some things he has to work on, but what are your thoughts on him and just kind of his coaching style and how it works with this team so far?
I was open minded, then I was skeptical, and now I'm back. I'm like kind of on the Ime train. I didn't like the defense switching everything early. Now it seems like he's not as strict with it. He's only deploying it in certain situations, or he's just loosening it up a little bit, and the players are starting to figure it out because he was making them play it a lot, and it's working. Their defense has gotten much better. Um, his rotation, I don't like. I wish he played, Pritchard and Neesmith more regularly. I know Neesmith had a pretty awful game last game, but the game before he was great because he was kind of forced into action because Richardson was out. We'll see what happens when Romeo's back. Neesmith may get buried again, but I just think especially there's a game like Toronto or Chicago where they're just listless. There's nothing good on the floor. The energy, you can just see it, is so bad. I think a guy like Neesmith, who's psycho, is going to come in and just dive headfirst for an offensive rebound or something. And yeah, he may do something stupid, but he's going to play with energy. I think there's value in that. And I would have liked to have seen him in those games. And I think Pritchard could be valuable, but he needs to play. He absolutely needs to play to improve, because he's like, he's not going to get better on the bench. He's not going to get better in practice. He's only going to get better with NBA minutes. And I think he's a prospect. I don't think he's ever going to be an elite starter in the league, but I think he can be a spot starter and a pretty great backup. TJ McConnell with a jump shot is a really awesome thing if that's what he can end up being. But he's got to play. So that's one thing I haven't been a big fan of. But again, he's going to figure that out. And one thing I do really like is I feel like he calls timeouts right when I'm like, call a timeout. With Brad, it always felt like it was at least 3 possessions too late. You're like, why didn't you call a timeout earlier when
Yeah,
you had
that
the
is
lead
very
still
true.
and we could all see the game just slipping away, and you waited until you're down 2 possessions to call a timeout? Whereas
Yeah.
Ime, I feel like he's spot on with it. They haven't been reacting necessarily to those timeouts, but at least he's calling them at the right time. And I don't know with the reviews, it's a you never know like what's going to be called. Like who was it that was it the Bulls game? I can't remember which game it was where they just totally got screwed. by the other team reviewing it.
Oh yeah, I
Tatum
remember.
got fouled, and then they reviewed it like, you know what? Tatum complains a lot. We're just going to say that it's
Yeah, and
actually
that was
not a foul.
which was ridiculous to
Yeah.
me.
So I just think reviews are kind of a coin toss anyway. So I haven't had an issue with that. I know there's some moments where people are like, why didn't he review that? And others where he did review and he didn't win. It just
I feel like
so
it's
I don't
kind of
think anybody's going to be good at that.
yeah. I feel like there's not really a way to be good at that, really. I feel like it's a hit or miss type of situation with those reviews. And I mean, in that exact situation, yeah, that was really disappointing because they did kind of get screwed on that. So it's like, how is there really there's not really a way to sit here and tell him how to be better when in that how to be better with those types of situations because I feel like there really isn't a way to be better. So it's hard to criticize somebody. I feel like for that.
Right. So I mean,
Um
look, I think he'll be good.
yeah, I mean, I feel like they needed a fresh new face in there anyway. To coach the team. I think that it's beneficial that they have somebody new in there to kind of approach this roster and this system and see how it goes. Obviously, like you said, he'll figure some of this stuff out. I mean, it's his first year as a head coach, and he's not going to be perfect right from the start. And I mean, of course, there's people already saying we need to fire him, but I try to
They won't.
ignore those types of comments as well because it's it's still so early on in the season that he still has so much more time to figure things out. I think he overall, I think I like what he brings to the table in terms of personality and the way that he seems to gel with the team. I feel like that's important. So I think right from the start that that's something that I'm seeing that I really like about him and his personality. I think might work here. So that from that perspective, I think it's a good situation. But I obviously think there's in-game decision making that he needs to improve on still. But I feel like that's going to come with time.
Right. And maybe some, out of timeouts that haven't been great, but I don't know what he drew up and I don't know what the play was because there's a lot of situations where you're like, was that supposed to happen? Or, so just a little, just got to get a little bit better in certain in-game situations, like you said, but give him some time, because Brad came in and was like already a Mensa with like the whiteboard, because he's got that memory where he can just remember every single play he's ever run.
Yeah.
That's not normal. But I think, there's a good chance that he's going to be able to pick up, all that kind of stuff and find out what works for this team specifically and for his guys and hopefully draw up some beauties for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I trust that that will come over time and that he's still trying to figure things out right now. So that's why I'm not, panicking over him right now or the decisions he makes. Cause obviously, he's new at this and everything takes time to figure out. And he hasn't worked with these players before. So it's an adjustment for him. But I do really like a lot of the players that he is working with now and that have been brought in this year. I think Al Horford being back is huge. This is somebody who's been in the Celtics uniform before. He's a veteran. He can be a leader for this team. And I think that that's super important. And he's made such an impact already from being back here. And so I think that that was one of the best offseason moves that was made for this team or this year because I think that he's making such a difference already by being back here. And I think that that's off the court and on the court.
Yeah, I think he's playing great. He's playing way better than anybody expected. And I think he's a great influence on Robert Williams. I really do. He said it, but Robert Williams said it when Al had left too. That Al was a big influence on him his rookie year. Really helped him just learn how to be a professional and everything. And he's been a model professional since after the first week of his career. So I mean, that's really good, and you got to give Al some credit for that, and also obviously Rob. But and just with the defense and the communication and all that stuff, and just being a guy who's been through it, especially when there was a little bit of the drama, after the
Yeah.
Bulls game, and Al's the guy that comes out and talks, when nobody else would after Marcus. So I
Yeah.
think that it's great, and I think that Schroeder has been definitely net positive. He's had some moments where I'm just like, oh God, get him out of the game, but then he ends up being the key to a run that they go on. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm sitting at a computer while other people are making those decisions. But I like that they have a guy that just goes to the basket with the intent to score, and sometimes the selection's a little different or a little questionable, but he's good. He's a good offensive player, and I've been really, really happy with his addition as well. Josh Richardson's been way better than I thought he would be. I am not a huge fan of his, but like I think it was last game. Yeah, he'll win you some games occasionally. Like he'll just get hot in his little mid-range game, and you're just like, oh, that's a gross shot. Oh, why not? Okay. As long as you don't count on him, he'll be good for you, and I think he'll be a good role player for this team. So that overall, really, pretty good offseason.
Yeah, and I mean, with Schroeder, I actually said that the other day. I said it's nice to see him driving to the basket because I feel like this team so far right now is very 3-point heavy and they'll just like toss up threes and they don't need to do that every time. And I feel like it's hard to, see that because you can have people that can just be aggressive and drive to the basket and, really score in the paint. And I feel like they don't do that as much. And a lot of times on offense, they'll just toss up threes, which is holding them back a little bit offensively. And I feel like that's a frustration, at least for me, from what I've seen so far, is that I'll watch them sometimes and I'm like, why you don't have to go for a three there. There's no reason to. You don't like it's not a three or bust every time you have the ball. And
Yeah,
that's something that I found to be frustrating so far this year. So seeing Schroeder just actually drive to the basket and be aggressive is refreshing to me.
absolutely, and he'll throw some lobs up. He's always looking to throw lobs, and I feel like the that's kind of rubbing off on the rest of the team too. You got Jalen and Jason throwing lobs, which I don't feel like they regularly did before. I could be mistaken. Marcus has always been a guy that's looking to throw lobs, but
Yeah.
unless Rob's out there, there's usually not someone to throw the lobs to. But getting him involved, I mean, he's been great this season too. And I think that they're starting to figure out the defense, where he's not just stuck on the perimeter all the time. But even if he is, he's a weapon out there too. He really is good at blocking shots on
Yeah.
the perimeter for a big man because he's just so athletic. He's so athletic and long, and I think that as long as you do that a couple times, the threat of that's really going to have guys speed up their shot, and you don't have to block it to impact it.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that as well. That's a really good point. And I think overall we're especially last game gave me hope that they're starting to figure some of this stuff out and they're cleaning up some of the stuff that, granted until the end of the game really, like there weren't as many, dumb turnovers and just bad mistakes and they're starting to clean up some of this stuff and I think they're realizing what kind of has been going wrong and I think that's a really good thing because they are starting to fix some things and so I think that's promising for kind of how the rest of the season goes but I still would like to see them kind of diversify their shots a little bit more still because I think that there's still work to be done there and I think they're capable of doing more offensively than they're showing that they're doing right now.
Yeah, and I think getting to the line's another thing they're going to need to do more. And when they get there, hitting them. I feel like they're losing some close games here where you look at the free throw shots they got, they didn't make a high enough percentage. It's pretty gross. So got to make the free ones. You got to get there, and you got to attack guys that have fouls. I feel like sometimes that's a strategy that a lot of teams just don't think to do, but a lot of smart teams do, where you're just like, oh, this great player of yours is in foul trouble. Like I think Luka had 4 fouls in the fourth quarter. I would have just whoever he's on, just take it to the basket.
Yeah.
Hopefully he fouls you. Get him on the bench because he's really good. So some things like that they got to iron out. But again, they're just coming together, and the problem is that they have guys missing time and out, and so now Jalen's going to be out, and just when you felt like there was some positive momentum even after the loss to Dallas, now they're going to be without him for 1 to 2 weeks, and that's going to be a little bit of a setback in terms of just getting some chemistry, but hopefully the other guys can step up.
It's just like when he went down right before the playoffs last year. That's kind of when I knew, yeah, they don't really have a real shot here. They can't. I was like, they're not going to beat Brooklyn without him. That's just. It was unfortunate to have to feel that way, but I just felt like that was the reality of the situation. That was just too much of a loss for them. And obviously, it's not as serious of a situation now because it's not right before the postseason. But anytime you lose somebody like Jalen, who's such a key piece to this team, when they're starting to figure things out, is definitely upsetting. And I feel like that's just we're going to notice that he's we're going to notice that his presence isn't there. And it's definitely concerning that, it's somebody that's that valuable to the team.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this about Jalen. One thing that I've always been really impressed with him is that he fits. He fits. He's a really good fit wherever you want him to go. Like his first couple of years, Brad was yanking him in and out of the starting lineup. So, and he never said a word about it, and he just did what he was told, whatever role he was in. So, I think if the Celtics get some momentum and they start to have some cohesion and some chemistry on offense, I don't think Jalen coming back is necessarily going to screw that up because I feel like he can ease back in. I do think that he's the guy that should be taking the most or second most shots. So that's going to be a bit of a change there, but it's going to be a welcome change when he comes back. So I don't worry necessarily about incorporating when he does come back. I'm hoping that the Celtics do build some chemistry while he's gone, but that he'll be able to just fit right in.
Yeah, I'm a lot more worried about when he's gone than when he comes back.
Right.
To be honest with you, I think I'm when he comes back, I'm with you on that. I feel like he can just kind of jump right back in as if he never left, and just be able to just fit right in with whatever they have going at that time. But yeah, I think it'll be a good opportunity for everybody else to establish some chemistry on the court, and just kind of see what they can do without him. And I think it can be definitely concerning because I think he's obviously, like we said, he's a key piece, but I think this could be a good opportunity for other players to really start to find their stride and really figure out what their role is on this team.
Yeah, and Wednesday's going to be a big test against Toronto. They're supposed to be bad. They're not bad. They punched the Celtics in the face in the Garden, the first game of the Garden, and
That was bad.
however, like 500 days or something, and that was an embarrassment. And the Celtics should be out for blood, but they're good. And Scotty Barnes, man, he is so impressive, and they're going to pester Tatum. And one thing that has been noticeable is that what we were talking about before, Tatum looked like he was frustrated. A lot of it's because teams are just doubling him. They're just trying to keep the ball out of his hands, and every time he touches it, they're really frustrating him. He's going to have to improve at breaking double teams and dealing with double teams, or just because it's not. I don't think it's an option to just say, all right, well, they're going to take him out of the equation, so we'll just go to somebody else. There really isn't anybody else, so they're going to have to find ways to get Tatum the ball, and he's going to have to deal with a lot of nonsense in these coming weeks.
Yeah. I mean, that's very true, as well as he's going to have to just know how to manage those types of situations and really be able to think on his feet about what to do in that type of situation. Because I mean, like you said, there really isn't anybody else. So he's just really going to have to be smarter in those types of situations, and hopefully that kind of continues to come, and as he continues to develop, he'll be able to figure that out more and kind of be smart in those situations and figure out what he should be doing. And I think overall, I really like a lot of just what they've shown, just in terms of they're aggressive a lot with the basketball, and I feel like we haven't seen that always. I feel like they just, they're aggressive, and they've been moving the ball around pretty well overall, I think, and that's optimistic to me. It's something to be optimistic about. Is there just good ball movement and just being aggressive down the stretch in games, like you mentioned before, and just really feeling like they're not out of it and not losing that energy in the fourth quarter where they would just kind of give up last year if they were out of those games, or they felt like they were out of those games. It's like you have a better sense now, I feel like, that they're going to fight till the very end, and they're going to continue to be aggressive even if they're losing, because we have seen them come back in games already this year when, I didn't think that they would come back, and they've made it interesting towards the end. And I feel like that's the attitude that they need to have all season.
100%. And you know what they've shown, basically since I started covering them 9 years ago, was that, the more you count them out, the better they are. They're much better with lower expectations, and I think there's going to be lower expectations now that Jalen's hurt. So don't be surprised if they win some games that maybe they're not supposed to.
Yeah, which would be nice. I mean, because I don't think everybody's expecting much of anything because of Jalen being out. But they usually surprise people when they shouldn't, and when people don't expect it. So I think, I think there's definitely opportunities for them to really find their stride with him gone, and then he can just be thrown back into the fire when he when he's able to play again. But I mean, I think there's a lot of question marks still in terms of just after this season, what happens. I think a lot of it obviously is dependent on how they do this season. But for example, I mean, players like Marcus Smart, I mean, do you think that he's part of the future of this team? Because there is a lot of speculation that they would eventually move him down the road if he's not really part of what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got a movable contract. I love Marcus. I think he's a winning player, but I think that he's the kind of guy that, if you want to sign a free agent, you can use his salary, and Josh Richardson as well. You can use his salary to try to, for a sign and trade, things like that. I don't think you're going to be trading him for a piece, uh, other than maybe like a salary match, and because he's got 3 years, or yeah, he'll have 3 years left on his deal. But at the end of the day, it's not like it's an albatross. It's an affordable contract, and he's a good player. He's not a elite offensive player, but he can run an offense, and he can hit some clutch shots, and he's just a dog on defense. So I don't think he's a guy that the teams would be hesitant to include if it's a throw in to have salaries match, whether it's a sign and trade or a trade for another player. So I think that it was a smart move to sign him because it keeps your options open. Same with Rob. Although I think they want to build with Rob, as long as he can stay healthy. And the same with Richardson. He's not an expiring. They get the extra year there. So they're set up to do stuff. The problem is that there's, it's been a couple years since it was the case, but it was like every summer it was like, oh, what are the Celtics going to do? And then they don't do anything, and everyone's like so let down. But we'll see what happens. I'm so tainted by it not happening a lot. Although they did sign Horford and Hayward, and then they traded for Kyrie. So a lot of people are just saying that nothing ever happens when Danny was here, because he made a lot of moves. He made a lot of big team altering moves that were at the time very good, that ultimately didn't win a championship, but they were pretty successful with them. So I'm still hesitant to think that like Bradley Beal's a guarantee. I know he's friends with Tatum, but does he want to leave Washington? Does he want to, maybe he wants, maybe he signs his max deal with Washington and then 6 months later requests a trade, and then there's the move. And do the Celtics have the pieces? Because it's not just salary. If you're trading for a guy, you have to have things that the other team wants. And if you're trading for Bradley Beal, your first round picks are not going to be like great assets. They're going to be in the 30, in the high 20s. So, I don't know if they have the pieces to straight up trade for a player. So I think free agency is the way they're going to go. But, look what the Bulls did. They went and they signed a restricted free agent, Lonzo Ball. They, they used a sign and trade for that. And then they signed DeMar DeRozan, who people, at the time I was like, why are they signing DeMar DeRozan? And now it's like, oh, okay, that's a really good fit.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a player like that that's kind of under the radar that they have their eye on, that's not this big splashy free agent.
Yeah, which is definitely very possible. And I think as long as it's somebody that could really fit in here, it doesn't have to be that big flashy player like on paper that every team would want. It could just be somebody that maybe just works with the Celtics that you might not expect or name as one of the players that you would want to get in free agency. If it's somebody that can come here and really contribute and be a good fit here, then that's really what matters at the end of the day. Like, I mean, maybe it isn't like, yeah, like those, one of those top flashy free agents that you would want on any team. It could be somebody else. And I feel like when Danny was here, a lot of the moves that he did make, like some of the ones that you mentioned, kind of just went ignored / relatively unnoticed because they didn't win a championship. And so people automatically just, turn that light off and they're like, yeah, he didn't do enough because we didn't win a championship while he was here, like in those times when he did try to make moves. So it doesn't really matter what he did because it didn't work anyway. But then you have Brad, who comes into that role and is pretty aggressive right off the bat with moves. And it's because I feel like he kind of knew exactly what he wanted to do when he stepped into that role, because he knew what the team's immediate needs were. So he just comes in and he's a lot more aggressive. And I feel like I kind of expect the same thing when it comes to this upcoming summer and free agency. I feel like after this season is over, I feel like he'll have a good sense of what the team needs at the time. And I don't think he's going to waste time kind of like he did right when he stepped into this role now. I feel like it'll be a similar situation where he's just going to have in mind, okay, this is what I feel like this team needs right now. And he'll just jump right into it like he did. And he might have players in mind that none of us will know about until he makes a move like that.
Yeah, you're right. And look, I don't think they need to be looking for their best player on the market. I think they have their best player. It's Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
They have an elite number 2 in Jaylen Brown, who would be the best player on like 15 teams. Um, and so they don't need like a, a superstar. It would be great to get one. It would be like, let's start rolling out another banner right in 2022 on it if they do. But I think they could still win a championship if they get their third best player. That's a great number 3 that just fits, like you were saying. Like, the fit is so important because Kemba, in theory, was like a great, like, a consolation with the whole Kyrie mess. It was like, get Kyrie out of here, and now we have Kemba. Because I remember during Kyrie's last year, it was just miserable, and I was like, man, it'd be so great if they could trade Kyrie for someone like Kemba Walker, who just seems like, he's not as good, but like he's close, and he seems like such a better teammate and fun, and he's never hurt because he wasn't those last 3 years. He missed like 2 games the last 3 years in Charlotte.
Yeah.
It turned out not to be the case, but a move like that where, and I don't, they were, Jaylen and Jason weren't what they are now when they signed Kemba. So Kemba was coming in to like be the guy or to be like one of the guys. So, but they just need a fit. They need a guy that fits, that can help, probably at the point guard position, but I don't have a list in front of me, and hopefully it's someone that we're not thinking of, and Brad makes a great move that no one sees coming, and we all look back and say, oh, what a great move, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I love Kemba. I mean, I grew up really close to UConn too, so I like grew up watching him when he was in college as well. So I was super happy when he came to Boston. I have a Kemba Celtics jersey, no big deal. It's okay. I've moved past it. But yeah, I feel like he just wasn't really equipped to be in the role that they needed him to be in when he got here. I feel like there was more being put on him than he was really ready for or was meant to do. And I think that's kind of why it didn't really work out with him. And I still think he was a great teammate. And I think that he is a good guy to kind of have around in terms of personality and off the court. I just feel like he needed to be in kind of a lesser role than what the Celtics really needed him to be when he got here. And I think it just wasn't going to work with him from that perspective because it was really, it was Tatum, Brown, and Kemba as the other guy. And that was really it. So he really, I feel like, was trying to take on a bigger role than I think he was really equipped for. And ultimately, I think that's why it didn't work with him.
Right. And I think he's in a good spot now. I think it worked out for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. I mean, I'm happy for him. Obviously, I want to see him succeed, but it's just a bummer that it didn't work out for him here because I really do like him as a person and a player and just as a teammate. I think he's a good person to have around, like in the locker room and with that chemistry. And obviously, from that perspective, was better than Kyrie.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But yeah, I think there's there's things they can do. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, for the rest of the season and even approaching the trade deadline when that comes up, where they're at that point, because I think that'll determine, whether Brad is aggressive at the trade deadline or not. And I think that's going to be interesting to kind of see where they're at that point. That's why I feel like, this part of the season is very much experimental in terms of who's going to work and who's not, and who do we see as part of our future and who do we not right now.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting at the trade deadline because, Danny had a very like clean, clear to see philosophy. He's never going to overpay for a rental. He's like just not going to do it. It's, a first round pick will never go to a player on an expiring contract because that's what bad teams do. But sometimes it works for teams. And sometimes you can get guys to re-sign with you. So we'll see. I don't think Brad will trade a first round pick. I think they'll probably try to keep things pretty clean next off season, but who knows if they go on a run and they're really looking like they might be able to contend with another piece, and who's available out there. There's the rumors about Ben Simmons, but
I was going to bring that up too.
I
Yeah,
mean,
they're interested in trading for.
I think he'd be a really good fit with Jalen and Jason, but like, who are you trading for him? Like, who on
Yeah.
earth would the Sixers accept back in that trade? You
Yeah.
know, they're not going to accept, Marcus Smart and Aaron Nesmith and Romeo Langford. That's, they would just trade him for CJ McCollum at that point. So I think,
It would likely it'd have to be like a Jalen Brown type of player. I feel like
and I
that
would
would
never do that.
be great
I
in
would
that.
never do that.
That
Look,
would
I
just be
love the
stupid.
Sixers. I would love that for them. It would
Yeah.
be a terrible move for the Celtics.
Yeah.
And people are floating that out there and just like, look, as a Sixers fan, sure, 100%. What pains me watching Ben Simmons is that I compare him to Jalen. I compare how Jalen struggled with his free throws, struggled with his shooting in college, struggled dribbling, struggled finishing with his left hand, and every single year came back better, better, better. Saw his weaknesses and made them into strengths. And what an example for like life, let alone being a professional athlete. And I see Ben Simmons literally stay exactly the same. Put in the minimal effort it requires to be a professional basketball player. Still signs the max deal. Still posts his Instagram videos where it looks like he can shoot, but this jumper is still broken. Hires his brother as a shooting coach. Like, what? Get
Yeah.
out of here. Has awful
Seriously.
people around him. It's like, no, you don't trade a Jalen Brown for a Ben Simmons. You
That would be
don't.
so stupid. That would just be like the ultimate just dumb move that they could do. I would
But
be
it
I
doesn't
mean,
mean that you can't get Ben Simmons with those two still here.
yeah.
Like if there was a way to make it work, maybe 3-team, it would be really, really awesome because he is a really good player. Ben Simmons is, but Jalen just I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously it just didn't work out for him in Philly, but I mean, he could be good here with the personalities on this team. But again, I feel like there'd have to be another team involved because I just don't see them just accepting anything less than somebody like a Jalen Brown from what the Celtics can offer right now. It's like, yeah, it's like, okay, Marcus Smart for Ben Simmons, sure. Like they're not going to agree to that. You know what I
Look,
mean?
as much as I love Marcus, that's just not going to be enough. And look, Ben, look, Philly, as far as Boston is not that different in terms of how the fans treat their teams. I mean, it's less negative, but not that much less negative in Boston. I mean, it's the sports radio stuff. There's a ton of talk shows. We have talk shows on our air, 2 of them every single night. You know, it's a very similar environment to Philadelphia, and the fans have high expectations. And Ben Simmons would not get a free pass. He just wouldn't. Rondo used to get crapped on for being bad at free throws and being kind of a jerk to the media sometimes, but he won a title and he was really good. And he was an all-star and great player and was willing to shoot threes even if he wasn't good at them. But a player that just refuses to shoot, nah, it wouldn't work here.
Yeah.
So again, it
Yeah.
would be an interesting experiment, and maybe he would grow a little bit as a person, but not trading Jalen Brown for him.
Attitude is a huge thing here, and so that's a big part of it too. So, I mean, I think it could work with him here in general. I just think, yeah, I think there would have to be another team involved because I just don't think that the Celtics right now would be able to offer them enough for him that they would actually agree to without feeling like they have to move Jalen, which they absolutely cannot do. That should be completely
Right.
out of the question.
Their best prospects like Robert Williams, right? So
Yeah.
like a team like Philly has literally zero use for that.
Exactly. That's the thing. So that's why I feel like when I saw that news, I was like, well, how likely is it that that's actually going to happen? I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, if it does happen, it could actually work with him. But I think there would have to be a lot more involved than just a straight up trade between the Celtics and the Sixers for him. I just don't see that happening. I think that they just don't have enough assets right now for that. But if they do pull it off, it'd be interesting to see how he kind of fits in with everybody.
Yeah, I just like a couple of my buddies were asking me about it today that are all Sixers fans, and I was like, so if you're Daryl Morey, you're gonna give a division rival, pretty hated rival, Dr. J punched Larry Bird in the face like 8 times in a row in a fight one time. I mean, really like one of your classic rivals, not the Lakers, but up there. You're going to give them 3 25 and under all-stars that are all on long-term deals. Like, to me, that's crazy. There's no way a team would do that. Like, here, rival, regardless of what they're getting, unless they're getting, it's a 3-team deal with Dallas and they're getting Luka, like that's just not a thing. I can't, even in a 3-team deal, I can't imagine Philly allowing that circumstance with the team that they're competing for, a playoff spot for every single year. So
Yeah, it'd be one thing if the Celtics were in the West and they would kind of, then maybe they'd be a little more open to hearing out that kind of idea. But there's no way that they would agree to that against a team that, every year tends to give them problems in the postseason as it is. So why would they, so why would they give the Celtics a better opportunity to beat them in the playoffs again?
yeah, it's 4 times a year too. You'd have to play them.
Yep, exactly. That's the thing. I know it is kind of like it's funny to think about in a way because I'm just like, how would they even pull that off? But it'll be interesting to see if they actually do, since they're quote unquote interested in Ben Simmons.
That
So
feels like someone on the Sixers is just trying to drum up interest again.
yeah,
So
I think so too. I mean, I think he ends up getting moved. I just don't really see it being here. So it'll just be interesting to see what does happen with that situation. But I do think personality wise, I mean, obviously he has to kind of fix his attitude a little bit, but I think in terms of the chemistry on the court, he might actually fit here.
yeah, he would get, because they would be good. They would be really good because he's a really good defender. So that would alleviate some of the issues because you're not going to get killed for not shooting threes when you're winning.
Yeah.
But the playoffs are just just a really tough issue to deal with in the playoffs, and he just like he's the anti-Boston athlete. It's
That's
the
the
anti everything that this city stands for their sports. It's all about the people that step up in the postseason, and come out of nowhere and have great, moments, and help, hang banners, win trophies. And Ben Simmons took like 3 shots in 7 fourth quarters of that series versus Atlanta. It's just not a fit. Like,
yeah,
but
I know.
again, they would be good in the regular season, but I think it's just it's a lot of nonsense, which most stuff is.
Yeah, no, that is a really good way of putting it. Just a lot of nonsense that I think we need to be cleaned up a lot of. So I think there's just a lot that comes with that. If you get Ben Simmons, you have to know there's a lot that's coming with that. And it's a lot of stuff off the court that you're dealing with and asking for. So I don't know how good of a situation from that perspective it would really be, but on the court it could actually work. But yeah, I think who knows how serious they actually are. Well, I think we'll know pretty soon if that actually is a real thing that they're interested in or not. But if they are, then good luck to them trying to figure out how to, equally have Philly agree to that and just give them people that they feel are, that caliber that they feel is an even trade, because I don't really see that happening.
No.
But yeah, no, I think overall, this whole road trip gave me some promise. I think they're starting to really clean some things up. It'll be interesting to see what happens without Jalen, but I think they're heading in the right direction. And it's just a matter of, I think, just really just continuing to figure things out from a coaching perspective and just the chemistry with this team. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement still, but I think that a lot of these mistakes are fixable. So I think that's really good. And so I'm interested to see what happens for the rest of the season and just kind of where they stand when it comes to this upcoming summer and how far they have gone this year, because I think the potential is there, and I think obviously they're going to need a couple more pieces, but they're heading in the right direction. And I think that's kind of what people have to remember about this, is that they are definitely heading in a positive direction. And that whole championship or bust attitude needs to be thrown out the window probably, because it'll happen eventually. It's just probably not going to be this year. People need to prepare themselves for that.
Right. And you know what? I'm glad that they're getting the low points out of the way early in the season, and hopefully they can hit their stride and build, and let's see what happens in the playoffs.
Yeah, I definitely agree, but I really appreciate you joining me on the show. This was fantastic. I really enjoy your content. You're super knowledgeable, and I really like your work. So everyone definitely check it out. Check out all of his work. It's really really good. And follow him on social media. He does a really good job covering the Celtics. And as always, everybody, thanks for tuning into the show. Really appreciate everyone's constant support. Really wouldn't be here with this show without everyone supporting it. So I really appreciate that as well. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the week and enjoys the, dark at 5 o'clock every day now. So good luck to everybody and, have a great rest of your week. I'll talk to you all next time.